My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm 29 years old. I always thought family meant having people who would protect you, who would stand by you no matter what. That belief shattered the night I overheard my mother whisper to my sister Jessica, "She never says no to family. That's just who Sarah is." Those words revealed how they truly saw me. Not as a daughter or sister, but as a walking ATM they could drain whenever convenient. What followed was a betrayal so deep it changed everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and what family really means. They didn't just take advantage of me. They tried to destroy my entire future to save themselves. I never imagined I'd be the one to bring my own family to their knees, but sometimes survival means fighting the people who are supposed to love you most. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-preservation, and hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories about toxic family dynamics. Trust me, this story will make you question everything you believe about unconditional family love. I grew up in Millfield, a mid-sized town in Ohio where reputation mattered more than truth, and everyone pretended to know everyone else's business. Our house was the yellow colonial on Elm Street, the one with the perfect flower beds and the decorative mailbox. My mother, Linda, was obsessed with maintaining our family's image. She wanted everyone to see us as successful, united, and blessed. But behind our cheerful front door, the reality was much darker. From my earliest memories, it was obvious that my sister Jessica was the family princess. 2 years younger than me, she could do absolutely nothing wrong in my mother's eyes. When Jessica borrowed my birthday money to buy makeup, Mom said I should be happy to help my sister look pretty. When she crashed my car and lied about it, Mom told me accidents happen and I shouldn't hold grudges. Every mistake Jessica made was excused, while my smallest errors were dissected and criticized for days. "Family takes care of each other, Sarah," my mother would say whenever I protested the unfair treatment. "Someday you'll understand that sacrifice is what love looks like." I understood it meant I was expected to be the family's emotional and financial safety net. Jessica got to be carefree and irresponsible because I would always clean up her messes. When I was 18, I received a full scholarship to study business at Ohio State University. It was my ticket to independence, my chance to build a life based on my own choices rather than family expectations. The acceptance letter arrived on a Friday. By Monday morning, my mother had already begun her campaign to keep me close to home. "Your father's business is struggling, Sarah," she said, sitting me down at the kitchen table with that serious expression she used for family meetings. "Jessica is still finding herself, and you know how she is with responsibility. We need someone reliable to help manage things. You've always been the responsible one." The family business was a small construction company my father had built from nothing. Despite my dreams of studying business in Columbus, I ended up at the local community college, living at home and working part-time for Dad. My scholarship money went toward Jessica's art school tuition since she had decided she wanted to be a graphic designer. I studied accounting and business administration, preparing to eventually take over the family company as expected. When Dad died in a construction accident during my second year of college, the pressure to sacrifice my dreams intensified dramatically. "We're counting on you more than ever," Mom said at the funeral, gripping my hand while Jessica sobbed theatrically beside her. I noticed Jessica recovered remarkably quickly afterward, chatting with cousins about her latest art projects while I fielded questions from Dad's business partners about the company's future. After graduating, I got a job at a regional accounting firm in nearby Columbus. It was an hour commute each way, but it gave me some independence while keeping me close enough to handle the inevitable family emergencies. And they were constant. Jessica needed help with rent because her artistic pursuits weren't paying the bills. Mom needed assistance with Dad's old business clients who still owed money. Cousin Mark needed a place to stay just for a few weeks that turned into 6 months on my couch. The financial demands never stopped. $3,000 for Jessica's art supplies and studio rent. $5,000 for Mom's new roof. $2,000 for Aunt Linda's medical bills because we're family and we stick together. My apartment became the family storage facility. My spare bedroom became everyone's personal hotel. My vacation days were never my own because someone always had a crisis that only I could solve. My friend Rachel was the first to point out how unhealthy the situation had become. "They're using you, Sarah," she said one evening after I had to cancel our dinner plans because Jessica needed me to co-sign for a new car loan. "You're not responsible for subsidizing everyone else's poor decisions." "They're going through a rough patch," I defended, though even I was starting to doubt my own words. The rough patch had lasted my entire adult life and showed no signs of improving. The breaking point should have been the business loan incident. Jessica had this brilliant idea to open an art gallery and cafe. She needed $40,000 for the startup costs. My mother suggested she ask me for help. "You've always been so practical with money, honey," Mom said during one of our weekly family dinners. "Jessica has such a creative vision, but she needs someone with business sense to make it work." Family invests in family. Against every instinct I had, and despite my financial advisor's strong warnings, I emptied my savings account and took out a personal loan to help Jessica start her gallery. The business lasted 8 months before closing due to poor planning and Jessica's tendency to give away expensive artwork to friends. When I asked about repayment, both Jessica and my mother seemed shocked by my insensitivity. "She lost everything in that business, Sarah," Mom said, her voice dripping with disappointment. "How can you be so cold? She's your sister. Family doesn't keep scorecards." That was when I realized I had a serious problem. I was trapped in a cycle of self-sacrifice that had been programmed into me since childhood. I was the dependable one, the responsible one, the one who never said no to family. And my family was perfectly content to keep exploiting that dynamic forever. But something was changing inside me. A quiet resentment had begun to simmer beneath my carefully maintained facade. I started to imagine what my life might look like if I prioritized my own needs for once. I began to crave boundaries, independence, the right to say no. What I didn't know then was that my growing desire for autonomy would soon be met with the ultimate betrayal. The people who were supposed to love me most were about to show me exactly how far they would go to maintain control over me. The first time I tried to establish a boundary, you would have thought I had declared war on the family. It was such a simple request. "Please give me 24 hours notice before coming to my apartment." My mother reacted as if I had asked her to donate a kidney. "I didn't realize I needed permission to visit my own daughter," she said, her voice trembling with hurt. "I gave birth to you, Sarah. I raised you, sacrificed for you, and now you want to shut me out of your life." The guilt worked perfectly, as it always did. I immediately backpedaled, assuring her she was always welcome anytime. The boundary dissolved before it had even formed, leaving me feeling weak and manipulated. The pattern continued with every attempt I made to create space for myself. When I suggested Jessica could handle Mom's grocery shopping since she had more flexible hours, Jessica claimed she was too overwhelmed with her job search to take on additional responsibilities. When I mentioned I couldn't afford to keep lending money, Mom reminded me that Jessica was struggling and families help each other through difficult times. Then I met David. He was a marketing director I met at a networking event, and he saw something in me that I had forgotten existed. When we started dating, I felt like I could breathe again for the first time in years. David listened to my opinions, respected my time, and thought I was funny, a revelation, considering my family rarely paid attention to anything I said. Predictably, my family immediately perceived David as a threat to their control. Mom started calling with emergencies every time she knew we had plans. Jessica would show up unannounced when David was over, claiming she needed immediate help with some crisis. They launched a subtle but relentless campaign to monopolize my time and drive a wedge between us. But David was perceptive. One night, after I had cut our date short because Mom claimed she was having chest pains, which mysteriously resolved the moment I arrived, he took my hands and looked me in the eyes. "Sarah, I need to say something," he said, his voice gentle but serious. "I'm worried about your relationship with your family. They seem to demand everything from you while giving very little in return." My instinct was to defend them, but the words stuck in my throat. Deep down, I knew he was right. "They depend on me," I said weakly. "They don't mean any harm." "Intent doesn't matter if the impact is harmful," David replied. "You're exhausted constantly. You're missing opportunities at work because of all these last-minute emergencies. And I rarely see you truly relaxed unless we're somewhere your phone can't reach you. His observations hit home, but years of conditioning are hard to overcome. Still, David's perspective gave me new eyes to see my family dynamics. I began to notice patterns I had previously accepted as normal: the manipulation, the guilt trips, the way my needs were always secondary to everyone else's wants. The crisis that changed everything happened that fall when David and I had planned a long weekend trip to New York City. I had saved for months, requested the time off work well in advance, and was looking forward to my first real vacation in years. 3 days before we were supposed to leave, Jessica called in tears. "Sarah, I need your help desperately," she sobbed into the phone. "I messed up really badly, and I don't know what to do. Can you come over right away?" My heart sank, but I drove to her apartment immediately. What I found was Jessica pacing frantically around her living room, surrounded by official-looking papers and her laptop open to several different websites. "What's wrong?" I asked, though I was already dreading the answer. "I applied for this amazing job opportunity," she said, unable to meet my eyes. "But they want to do a background check, and I may have embellished some things on my resume. And there might be some issues with my credit that could come up." "What kind of issues?" I asked, though I was beginning to understand where this was heading. "I owe some money to a few people," she admitted. "And there are some credit cards I fell behind on. If this job offer falls through because of my background check, I'll lose my apartment. I'll have nowhere to go." I stared at my sister, seeing clearly how this would play out. She would ask me to let her move in temporarily. Then she would ask me to help pay her debts to clean up her credit. Then she would ask me to lie for her if the potential employers called for references. And somehow, this would all become my responsibility to fix. "Jessica, I can't solve this for you," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "You need to be honest with the employer and take responsibility for your mistakes." Her tears stopped immediately, replaced by shock. "You're not going to help me?" "I'm not going to enable you anymore," I replied. "You need to handle this yourself." Jessica's expression shifted from shock to anger. "Fine," she snapped. "I'll call Mom and tell her how selfish you're being. We'll see what she thinks about her precious, responsible daughter abandoning family when it matters most." I left her apartment feeling shaky, but oddly empowered. For the first time in my life, I had refused to be the family problem solver. It felt terrifying and liberating simultaneously. The phone calls started within an hour. First Jessica, then Mom, then various relatives I hadn't heard from in months, all expressing disappointment in my selfishness and lack of family loyalty. The pressure was intense, but I held firm. David and I went to New York as planned, and I had the first relaxing vacation of my adult life. When I returned, the atmosphere at family gatherings was noticeably colder. I was less immediately compliant with requests, taking time to consider before agreeing to help. This new hesitation was met with increasing pressure and guilt. "I don't understand what's happened to you, Sarah," Mom said during one of our weekly dinners. "You used to care about family. David is changing you, and not for the better." What I didn't realize was that the tension was building towards something far more sinister than family disagreements. My newfound independence had triggered a desperate response from people who had grown accustomed to using me. They were about to show me exactly how far they would go to maintain control. The first sign that something was seriously wrong came in the form of a credit monitoring alert on my phone. I had always been obsessive about my finances, especially after lending so much money to Jessica that never got repaid. I checked my credit score monthly and monitored all my accounts carefully. The alert informed me that a new credit card account had been opened in my name. I immediately called the credit card company, assuming there had been some kind of mistake or data breach. The customer service representative confirmed that someone had applied for and received a credit card using my social security number, date of birth, and employment information. "Did you authorize anyone to apply for credit on your behalf?" the representative asked. "Absolutely not," I replied, feeling a cold dread settling in my stomach. "I need to report this as fraud immediately." As I went through the process of disputing the fraudulent account, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't random identity theft. Someone with access to my personal information had deliberately used my identity. But who? I spent the next day placing fraud alerts on my credit reports and filing a police report. When I pulled my full credit report, I discovered multiple recent inquiries from various lenders. Someone had been busy trying to open accounts in my name. My first thought wasn't my family. Despite all their financial irresponsibility and manipulation, I couldn't imagine Mom or Jessica doing something so blatantly criminal. I suspected it might be one of the many cousins or friends who had stayed at my apartment over the years and potentially seen my personal documents. I called David in a panic, and he came over immediately. As I showed him the credit report and explained what was happening, his expression grew increasingly troubled. "Sarah, who has access to your personal documents?" he asked. "Your social security card, birth certificate, bank statements?" "No one," I said automatically. Then I remembered how things had been moved around in my apartment recently. "At least no one should." "Who has a key to your apartment?" David pressed. The question hit me like a physical blow. My mother had a spare key for emergencies. Jessica had borrowed my keys multiple times and could easily have made copies. Several relatives had stayed over and could have duplicated my keys without my knowledge. "You need to check your important documents right now," David advised. "If someone is stealing your identity, they probably need original documents to complete applications." We went through my filing cabinet systematically. My social security card was there, but my birth certificate was missing. Several recent bank statements were gone. My passport was still in its usual place, but it had been moved from where I always kept it. "I think you should install a security camera," David suggested quietly. "If someone is coming into your apartment and going through your things, you need to know who it is." The idea that I needed to spy on my own home to protect myself from potential family members was heartbreaking, but I knew David was right. That weekend, he helped me install a small, discreet security camera in my living room with a view of the entrance and my desk area where I kept financial documents. For several days, nothing happened. Then, on a Tuesday while I was at work, I received an alert that the camera had detected motion. With trembling hands, I opened the app on my phone and watched the footage. The video showed Jessica entering my apartment using a key. She moved confidently to my desk, opening drawers and searching through papers. She spent nearly 15 minutes looking through my files before finding what appeared to be a bank statement, which she photographed with her phone. Before leaving, she also searched my bedroom and bathroom. I felt physically sick watching my own sister violate my privacy and steal my personal information. But the worst was yet to come. The next day brought another motion alert. This time, the camera showed my mother entering my apartment. She went straight to where I kept my mail, sorting through it and taking several envelopes. She also spent time at my desk, photographing documents with her phone before carefully returning everything to its original position. Over the next week, I watched in horror as both my mother and sister made multiple visits to my apartment, systematically photographing my financial documents and stealing my mail. I set up additional cameras to capture more angles and gathered extensive evidence of their crimes. The most damning evidence came when I discovered they had accessed my email account. I found messages I had never sent, authorizing Jessica to discuss my accounts with various financial institutions. There were also email exchanges between me and Jessica discussing how I had agreed to help her with some investments, conversations that never happened but created a paper trail, making it look like I had willingly participated in their scheme. Then I found the email exchange that revealed their true intentions. Jessica had forwarded a loan denial to my mother, writing, "They're getting suspicious about all the applications. We need to move faster, or they'll figure out what we're doing." My mother's reply made my blood run cold. "Don't worry. If anything goes wrong, Sarah's credit is perfect, and she's always helped family before. We'll say she knew about everything and wanted to help. No one would believe she didn't agree to this. Worst case scenario, she takes responsibility for a while until things blow over. She'll understand it's for family." They weren't just stealing my identity for personal gain. They were planning to frame me for their crimes if they got caught. In their minds, I was not just a resource to be exploited, but a disposable scapegoat they could sacrifice to save themselves. I sat in my apartment, surrounded by evidence of my family's betrayal, feeling completely hollow. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally were willing to destroy my life, my career, and possibly send me to prison to protect themselves. All because I was the reliable one, the one who never said no to family, the one they could count on to sacrifice herself for their benefit. The depth of their betrayal was staggering. This wasn't just taking advantage of my generosity or manipulating me emotionally. This was calculated, premeditated destruction of my future, justified in their minds by years of conditioning me to believe that family loyalty meant accepting abuse. I called David, my voice shaking so badly he could barely understand me. When he arrived and I showed him everything I had discovered, his face hardened with each new piece of evidence. "Sarah, this is serious criminal activity," he said finally. "This is identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy. You need to report them to the police immediately." The thought of reporting my own mother and sister to the authorities made me physically ill. Despite everything, they were still my family. I still remembered Jessica teaching me to braid hair, Mom comforting me through childhood nightmares. "Maybe I can talk to them," I suggested weakly. "Maybe they don't fully understand what they're doing." David looked at me with a mixture of compassion and frustration. "They understand exactly what they're doing. The emails prove it. They're planning to let you take the blame for their crimes. They see you as expendable, Sarah." Deep down, I knew he was right. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a moment of poor judgment. It was a deliberate, calculated plan to exploit my love for them and destroy my life if necessary to protect their own interests. For the first time in my life, I was going to have to say no to family in the most final way possible. And it was going to cost all of us everything. I spent that night crying until I had no tears left, just an empty ache in my chest where my trust in family used to be. By morning, I had made my decision. David stayed with me, sleeping on the couch and checking on me throughout the night. Rachel came over early, bringing coffee and her fierce loyalty. They sat with me in my living room as I tried to process the incomprehensible betrayal. "I keep thinking there must be some explanation," I said, staring at my untouched coffee. "Some reason that would make this make sense." "There is a reason," Rachel said gently. "They're selfish people who don't care, who they hurt to get what they want. Even their own daughter and sister." "But they're my family," I whispered. "Biology doesn't give anyone the right to commit crimes against you," David replied firmly. "What they're doing is illegal, Sarah. It's not a family dispute, it's fraud." I knew they were right, but part of me needed to hear the truth directly from Jessica and Mom. I needed to give them one chance to explain, to take responsibility, to show some remorse. I decided to confront them at our weekly family dinner that Sunday. That Sunday felt like the longest day of my life. I dressed carefully, as if preparing for battle, which, in a way, I was. I brought copies of some of the evidence, not everything, but enough to prove I knew what they had done. David offered to come with me, but I knew this was something I had to face alone. When I arrived at Mom's house, the familiar smell of her Sunday roast filled the air. Jessica's car was already in the driveway. I knocked on the door of the house where I had grown up, suddenly feeling like a stranger. Mom answered with her usual warm smile, hugging me as if everything was normal. "You're right on time, honey," she said. "Jessica's already here setting the table." Dinner was surreal. We ate pot roast and discussed the weather while my heart pounded so loudly I was certain they could hear it. Mom asked about my work. Jessica talked about her latest art project. It was as if the evidence in my purse didn't exist, as if I had imagined the entire nightmare. Finally, as Mom served apple pie, I couldn't maintain the pretense any longer. "I know what you've been doing," I said quietly, looking between my mother and sister. "I know you've been using my identity to apply for loans and credit cards." The room went silent. Jessica's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Mom's smile faltered for just a moment before she composed herself. "What are you talking about, Sarah?" Mom asked, her voice carefully controlled. I pulled out the folder of evidence and placed it on the table. "I have video footage of both of you entering my apartment when I wasn't home. I have copies of emails between you discussing how to use my credit and how to frame me if you got caught. I have proof of multiple loan applications submitted in my name. Jessica's face flushed red. You put cameras in your apartment to spy on your own family? What kind of paranoid person does that? The audacity of her response was breathtaking. She was trying to make me the villain for protecting myself from their crimes. The kind of person who notices her personal documents being moved around, I replied. The kind of person who gets calls about loan applications she never made. Mom reached over and put her hand on Jessica's arm, silencing her. She turned to me with that patient expression she had used throughout my childhood when I was being unreasonable. Sarah, sweetheart, I think you're overreacting, she said in her most soothing voice. Yes, Jessica has been having some financial difficulties, and we may have used some of your information as reference points for her applications, but we never meant any harm. Reference points? I echoed in disbelief. You stole my identity. You submitted loan applications in my name without my knowledge or permission. We were going to pay everything back, Jessica interjected. It was just temporary until I got back on my feet. You're making it sound like we're criminals or something. What you did is criminal, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. It's identity theft and fraud. Mom's expression hardened. Lower your voice, Sarah. What will the neighbors think if they hear you shouting accusations at your own family? That's when I realized they weren't going to acknowledge what they had done. They were going to gaslight me, minimize their actions, and make me seem like the unreasonable one. I have proof, I insisted, tapping the folder. I have everything. The applications, the emails where you discuss letting me take the blame if things went wrong. A flash of recognition crossed Mom's face. She knew exactly which emails I was referring to, but her strategy didn't change. Jessica is struggling, Sarah, she said, her voice taking on the martyred tone I knew so well. She's trying to get her life together, and she needed help. That's what families do. We help each other through difficult times. By committing fraud? I asked incredulously. By doing whatever it takes, she snapped, her composed facade cracking. Jessica is an artist. She has talent and dreams. What do you have? A boring job and a boyfriend who's probably temporary. Jessica has real potential. Her words hit like physical blows. In her mind, my life, my future, my financial security were all acceptable sacrifices for Jessica's comfort and dreams. Jessica, seeing that Mom's approach wasn't working, tried emotional manipulation. Sarah, I was desperate, she said, tears welling up in her eyes. I made some mistakes with money, and I was going to lose everything. I thought you'd understand because you've always been there for me before. So you decided to steal my identity and potentially send me to prison? I asked, my voice breaking. It never would have come to that, Mom interjected quickly. Family protects family. If there had been any real problems, we would have worked it out.
How?
I demanded. What was your plan if I was arrested for fraud? Neither of them had an answer, which was answer enough. They had no plan to protect me because they had never considered the consequences for me. I was collateral damage in their scheme. I trusted you, I said, my voice barely audible. I have given everything to this family. Everything you ever asked for and more. And this is how you repay me. Don't be so dramatic, Jessica said dismissively. Nobody got hurt. I got hurt. I shouted, finally losing the control I had maintained. I got hurt every time you took advantage of me. I got hurt when you decided my future was worth less than yours. I got hurt when my own mother planned to let me go to jail for crimes I didn't commit. My outburst seemed to shake them both, but Mom recovered quickly. Look what you've done, she hissed. You're being hysterical and ruining Sunday dinner. This is exactly why we didn't tell you about Jessica's situation. We knew you'd overreact. That word, overreact, after everything they had done, was the final straw. Years of suppressed anger and hurt erupted. Overreact. I repeated. I have sacrificed my dreams, my money, my opportunities, everything for this family. And when there was nothing left to take, you decided to steal my identity and frame me for your crimes. And you think I'm overreacting? I stood up, gathering my evidence. I'm done. I'm done being your personal ATM. I'm done being the reliable one you can exploit and blame. I'm done sacrificing my life for people who see me as nothing more than a resource. As I turned to leave, Jessica grabbed my wrist. You can't report us, she said, her voice low and threatening. It would destroy our family. Think about what this would do to Mom's reputation in the community. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw not the creative free spirit Mom had always protected, but a selfish woman who had never faced real consequences for her actions. You should have thought about that before you decided to commit multiple felonies, I said, pulling my arm free. Whatever happens next is your responsibility, not mine. As I walked toward my car, Mom followed me outside. Sarah, please, she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. We're your family. You can't destroy us over money. Family forgives. Family sticks together, no matter what. I stopped at my car and looked at the woman who had raised me, who had shaped me into someone whose value was measured by what I could give rather than who I was. You destroyed our family when you decided to commit crimes against me, I said quietly. You destroyed it when you planned to let me take the blame for what you did. I'm not destroying anything. I'm protecting myself from people who are willing to send me to prison to save themselves. As I drove away from my childhood home, I felt something unexpected beneath the pain and betrayal. Relief. For the first time in my adult life, I had stood up for myself completely. I had said no in the most absolute way possible. I called David from the car, barely able to speak through my tears. He met me at my apartment, and I collapsed into his arms the moment he walked through the door. I couldn't do it, I sobbed. I wanted to give them a chance to make it right, but they don't even think they did anything wrong. David held me tightly. What do you want to do now? He asked gently. I sat up, wiping my tears with newfound resolve. I want to call my lawyer, and then I want to call the police. That night, as I made the calls that would forever change my relationship with my family, I felt a strange mixture of heartbreak and liberation. The Sarah who had always said yes, who had always put everyone else's needs before her own, was gone. In her place was a woman who had finally learned her own worth. The next morning, I met with Patricia Williams, an attorney who specialized in identity theft and fraud cases. I brought all my evidence: the video footage, the emails, the fraudulent applications, the credit report showing inquiries I had never authorized. She reviewed everything methodically, her expression growing increasingly serious. This is one of the most comprehensive cases of family identity theft I've seen, she said finally. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon. Family members have the access, the personal information, and often the emotional leverage to commit these crimes while expecting the victim to protect them. What are my options? I asked. Legally, you can report the identity theft to police and press charges, Patricia explained. You can file civil suits to recover damages. Or you can try to handle this privately, though given the extent of the fraud and their planning to frame you, I strongly advise against that approach. If I report them, what would happen? Identity theft is a felony. Given the amount of money involved and the premeditated nature of the fraud, they could face significant prison time, hefty fines, and restitution requirements. The thought of my mother and sister in prison made me feel sick, but the alternative, allowing them to destroy my financial future and potentially frame me for their crimes, was unacceptable. I need to think about this, I said. Take the time you need, Patricia replied. But don't take too long. Every day that passes gives them more opportunity to cause additional damage or cover their tracks. I spent the rest of that week in a haze, going through the motions at work while my personal life crumbled. David and Rachel took turns staying with me, worried about my emotional state. I couldn't sleep, barely ate, and felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of the betrayal. Meanwhile, the evidence continued to mount. I discovered Jessica had opened 2 more credit accounts in my name. Mom had been redirecting some of my mail to a post office box. They were accelerating their fraud, perhaps sensing that I was getting suspicious. The decision was made for me when I received a call from Detective Martinez, who was investigating a fraud case. Someone matching Jessica's description had attempted to take out a large loan using my identification documents at a bank where the loan officer had become suspicious and reported it. Do you know anyone who might have access to your personal documents? Detective Martinez asked. Someone who might use your identity without permission? I realized then that this was bigger than just my family's betrayal. They were committing crimes that would eventually be discovered regardless of whether I reported them. The only question was whether I would be implicated in their scheme or protected as a victim. That evening, I called Patricia Williams again. "I want to file a police report," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I want to do whatever is necessary to protect myself and hold them accountable." Under Patricia's guidance, I filed comprehensive reports with the police, the Federal Trade Commission, and all three major credit bureaus. I provided all the video evidence, emails, and documentation of every fraudulent account I had discovered. I also contacted every financial institution where accounts had been opened in my name, disputing the charges and providing evidence of fraud. It was a tedious process that took weeks, but gradually the fraudulent accounts were closed and the negative marks were removed from my credit report. Patricia advised me to document every interaction with my family from that point forward. "If they contact you," she warned, "save every text, email, and voicemail. We need to establish their pattern of behavior and any attempts to intimidate or manipulate you." The response from my family was immediate and predictable. My phone exploded with calls and texts from Mom and Jessica, alternating between tearful apologies and angry accusations. Extended family members I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly reached out, pressuring me to work things out within the family and not involve law enforcement. Following Patricia's advice, I didn't respond to any of them directly. Instead, I had her send formal cease and desist letters to both Mom and Jessica, stating that all communication should go through her office and warning them against any further use of my personal information. The investigation revealed that the fraud was even more extensive than I had initially discovered. Jessica had taken out over $85,000 in loans and credit using my identity. She had also used my information as collateral for other financial obligations, putting me at risk for debts I knew nothing about. Mom's role was less direct, but equally damaging. She had helped Jessica access my apartment, stolen my mail, and most disturbingly, had written emails explicitly planning to frame me if their scheme was discovered. As the legal process moved forward, I focused on rebuilding and protecting my life. I placed extended fraud alerts on all my credit reports, changed every password and security question I had, and moved to a new apartment in a secured building where my family couldn't access me. I even changed banks to ensure they couldn't manipulate their way into my accounts using the personal information they knew about me. Through it all, I maintained a focused determination. I was no longer the Sarah who would sacrifice herself for family harmony. I was someone new, someone who valued herself enough to fight back. 4 months after my initial report, Patricia called with an update. "The district attorney is moving forward with charges against both your mother and sister," she said. "Identity theft, fraud, mail theft, and conspiracy. They want to know if you're prepared to testify if this goes to trial." Despite everything, I hesitated. Testifying would mean publicly declaring that my own family had betrayed me in the most fundamental way. It would make the break permanent and irrevocable. "Think about it," Patricia advised. "But remember, they were prepared to let you go to prison for their crimes. They counted on your love for them to protect them from consequences." That night, I received an unexpected visitor. Mom somehow found my new address and appeared at my door.